But turning now to tonight's main event, which is that Steve Judd has joined us, and we are extremely honored to have an astrologer of his caliber join us tonight. One of the things that he has written about his talk, which is going to be called "Is God Finally Becoming the Machine?" In his digest, what he has said is, as we emerge into the most condensed period of compressed time in human history, so the acceleration of evolution gathers place. The exponential rise in human population is being matched by a similar rise in both technological development and spiritual awareness. During this lecture, Steve will attempt to suggest ways in which Pluto in Aquarius symbolizes these changes, and then he's going to postulate potential outcomes over the coming few years. And just to give us, I mean, we all know Steve so well. I know we're all fans and we all follow him on YouTube, and we've followed him for a long time. So we know a lot about him. But I'm just going to give a little bit of biography about him for those who may be new. Steve picked up his first astrological book in 1977, did his first reading in 1982, and has been online in various shapes and forms since 1998. So he was really at the cutting edge of getting the tech and getting modern in our new world of online comms. He graduated in 2005 as only the 11th person in the world to hold the MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, and that was from Bath Spa University, which is where he went. And he has financially supported himself solely through astrological readings and book sales since that time. As part of his punk origins in stand-up comedy, he has what he calls an evil twin brother, Caustic Astrologer, who is occasionally let out to play. He has records of over 35,000 readings, which he's done since 1982, and has nearly 100,000 followers on his YouTube channel. So, Steve, we welcome you. I know you're here to talk about the subject, as we've just mentioned, and I know you're also going to be talking about your book on Pluto, and you're also going to be giving us, I hope, a bit more of an insight into the documentary that you're making, because we've all heard about it as you've talked about it on YouTube, but I think we'd all like to know a few more details about that as well. But first, over to you, and the question, is God finally becoming the machine? Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Judd.
Thank you. A couple of points, first of all. I got back from filming the last European leg of the documentary tour about 8 or 9 days ago, and I promptly got pretty sick. And I've been pretty sick in this last week, which is why I haven't posted a lot on YouTube. I'm better now, thanks to homeopathy, but I'm still coughing a lot. So every so often, I'm going to burst into a spasm of coughing. Sorry, Secondly, I'm just going to get the plug in first. The Law of Pluto, Reshaping the Void, by me. And you can buy it on Amazon as a download. You can buy it in any good bookshops in all around the world, and you can get signed copies from me. Right, Pluto. I'm not going to go straight into Pluto in Aquarius. I need to give a bit of context first. I'm not going to be looking at a lot of charts. I've got some charts and I've got some graphics. But let me give a little bit of context first on Pluto, the planet, both the astronomy and the astrology. When Uranus was discovered in 1780, it was a time of revolution all around the world. French Revolution, the American Revolution, the birthplace of people who discovered electricity, Faraday, people like that. When Neptune was discovered in 1840-41, it was the time of the first drug wars. Commercial brewing was just starting to happen. Hypnotism and mesmerism was happening. The first celluloid photos were being taken. It was very Neptunian time. As we got into the 1880s, 1890s, astronomers began to realize that Uranus and Neptune's orbit weren't circular, and that there seemed to be some force pulling them out of a perfectly circular orbit. So the astronomers at that time reasoned that there was a big planet outside the orbit of Neptune, which they christened Planet X, pulling Uranus's Neptune out of a synchronized regular orbit. So they said that Planet X, and their telescopes weren't big enough to find it. The main proponent of this was a guy called Percival Lowell, who was also the guy who postulated the idea of canals on Mars. Now, he was born the same couple of years as H.G. Wells, who come up with the idea of War of the Worlds and Martian invaders. And there's no record of Lowell and Wells ever meeting, but it'd be great if they did. Lowell worked out, he said, well, we haven't got the telescopes to see Planet X, but it's going to be found there at that point. And then he died. He died around 1910, 1915, something like that. Maybe 1920. And his work was shelved. Come 1930, I think it's called the Lowell, I forget the name of it. A new observatory opened in Pasadena in America, and they continued Lowell's work. It was funded by the Lowell family, and his wife, Constance, was still alive, and she was a thorn in the side of everybody there. But a minor part of the Lowell Observatory's new diktat, if you like, was to search for Planet X, and it was given to Clyde Tombaugh, a young aspiring astronomer. And he ignored all the rule books, and he just looked on the plane of the ecliptic, where he thought if there was going to be a Planet X, that's where it would be. He did use the plates from Lowell's work, and in 1930, in February 1930, he discovered Pluto. Now, the first example of Pluto's synchronicity is here, because as we now know, all of the planets in the solar system except Pluto orbit the sun in a fairly tight band, 8 degrees, maximum. Pluto's orbit is at 23 degrees to the ecliptic, sometimes 24. So it's only on the ecliptic for 5 years at a time, every 125 years, because its orbit is 248 years. And it was during one of these 5-year periods that Tombaugh found Pluto in Gemini, where Lowell said it would be. So immediately, we found Planet X, great. And then it was quickly realized that Pluto was much smaller and therefore impossible to be able to influence the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. There then came the conundrum of having discovered a new planet and not knowing what to name it. Percival Lowell's wife immediately demanded that it be called Percival, or Constance after her, or Minerva. And the American astronomical groups couldn't decide on a name, so they sent it across to the European Astronomical Union. And they sent it particularly to the head of the Astronomical Union of Europe at that time was, what was his name? Madon Falconer or something like that. And he was the main librarian at the Bodleian University, at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And he was the brother or the cousin of an astronomer who discovered and named the moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos. He was talking with his friends over dinner one night about what to call the new planet when his 8-year-old granddaughter, Venetia Burney, came into the room, and being in mind she was the granddaughter of an Oxford Don, she was already well versed in Latin and Greek, and she suggested the name Pluto on the grounds that it was dark and invisible and no one knew what it was, and it was hidden. And he liked that, so he sent that name back to the American Astronomical Union, and they liked it because it had PL at the start of it. So they decided to call it Pluto. Now, this is the actual story. Venetia Burney only died in the 1990s. She did an interview with NASA just before she died to confirm the story. And an American astrologer who lives in Britain, Alex Trenoweth, also interviewed her to confirm this story. And this is the true story of how Pluto got its name. However, if you read most of the old astrology books, they'll tell you the myth, the fiction. And that is that Clyde Tombaugh went home to his children after discovering a new planet and said, "Hey, kids, I found a new planet. What shall I call it?" And they'd just been watching the first of the new Disney movies. So they said, "Call it Pluto, Daddy." And so that the story goes that he called it Pluto after the first Disney movies. But Ray Sharpstein, the main animator for Disney at that time, confirmed later in the late 30s but in the first 4 Disney movies, 1930 to 1932, the dog was named Rex, not Pluto. And it was a direct intervention from Disney himself who suggested the name change. Whether that was influenced by the new planet or not, there's no record. By the late 1930s, the first archetypes of Pluto at an astrological level were being talked about. And certainly by the end of the 1940s, the basic premise of Pluto's archetypes were pretty well established. It's worth looking a little bit at the mythology of Pluto. Many of us will be familiar with the story of the Titanomachi, the war between the Olympians and the Titans. The Titans themselves were born of Uranus and Gaia. And the main Titan was Kronos, aka Saturn. And when Kronos castrated his father and threw his father's genitals into the sea, the white froth gave birth to Aphrodite. This is Greek myth. There's a lot of castration going on here. Fearful that his children would do the same to him, he ate his kids. And the first of his children was Hades, Pluto. So Hades Pluto spent the longest of time in the dark, in Kronos's stroke Saturn's belly. His wife, Rhea, another one of the Titans, was so basically hacked off with the idea that all of her children were being eaten, that she secreted her 6th child, Zeus, Jupiter, away, and he grew up on Crete, away from Olympus. On his return, he organized an army to take on the Titans. Some of the Titans joined with Zeus. Iapetus, Prometheus joined with Zeus, while some of the older Titans stayed with Kronos. For example, Atlas, the Hecontochires, the 100-headed beings, and the Cyclops and the Gorgons, although the Gorgons have a different ancestry. The Titanomancy was fought and the Olympians won. All of the Titans were consigned to Tartarus, which was the Greek version of Hell, Sheol, Hades, call it what you like. And then the original 6 Olympians, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, were split the firmament between them. At this point, the women were written out of history, which is a familiar story. And Zeus took the overworld, Poseidon took the water world, Hades took the underworld. In recent years, especially since the ephemerises of Demeter George and various other women, the asteroid goddesses, Hera, Juno, Vesta, Pallas Athena, and a large number of others have all come back into our consciousness, and now they have a much stronger place at the table. Shame it's 2,000 years too late. For a long time, that 600 years, there was no difference between Pluto and Hades in the Greek mythology. Pluto became the Roman name, but the name Pluto comes from a Greek word, Pluton, Pluton, which refers to the dark red minerals buried in the earth, which is why Pluto is so commonly associated with things like garnet and ruby. Pluto gradually became seen as the lord of the realm, and Hades became the realm. Now, Hades is commonly associated with hell, Sheol, Tartarus, but it's not all bad. There's the asphodel meadows, the Elysian fields. It's where heroes go to rest, the equivalent to Valhalla in Norse mythology. So Hades had its positive side, but the bottom line is that Hades was where the dead went to after they died. And there were various protections to make sure the dead and the living could never come back together. There were a number of rivers that sucked the life away from humans and that humans couldn't cross if they were alive. Most common is the river Styx, which was the ferryman took up humans over the river Styx, normally with a coin in their mouth, and the ferryman was Charon, which is now the main moon of Pluto. On the Hadean side of the river Styx, they were greeted by Cerberus, the triple-headed dog, whose job was to stop the dead leaving for the world of the living and to stop the living coming into the land of the dead. Now, as the Greek Empire collapsed and the Roman Empire began, the notion of Pluto as lord of the underworld became stronger. But you won't find any temples or shrines to Pluto. Similarly, in India, you don't find shrines or temples to Kali or Yama. You don't find shrines to the King of the Dead, the Lord of the Dead. One of the most common myths about Pluto is of how Demeter and her daughter Persephone were out collecting herbs, and the land erupted, and Pluto emerged from the earth in a chariot driven by big black horses and abducted Persephone into the underworld. He refused to let her go, and in turn, Demeter said, right, if I can't have my daughter back, I'm not going to let the plants grow, because Demeter stroke Ceres is the goddess of the grain, the goddess of the plants, and all about nurturing. So she said, right, I'm going to withhold my powers. By this time, the gods, particularly Zeus, were realizing, boy, if there's no food, that means everyone's going to die. There'll be no one left to worship us. So he sent Hermes, stroke Mercury, into the underworld to negotiate for Persephone's release. And Pluto agreed to release her, having impregnated her or given her pomegranate seeds. It's an analogy. And she came back for 6 months a year. So the land went through 6 months of growth, 6 months of decline. And this is the myth of the seasons. Now, this is what you will find in most Greek myth books, particularly those written by Robert Graves. I know members of Robert Graves' family, and Robert Graves was a misogynist. He was particularly down on women, and his writings they're not misogynistic, but they're borderline. There are much more recent translations of the Greek myths that suggest that Persephone was not abducted by Pluto, but instead was rescued from her dominant, abusive mother by Pluto, and that they married and lived happily ever after. But these are myths. There's no way of finding out the truth, and it is these myths that give us the archetypes we work with, because it is the Greek myths that spawn most of our meaning in Western astrology. Where are we up to? We're up to the end of the mythology. So by the time we're into the 1950s, Pluto is an established planet in the ephemeris. Its orbit has been worked out. We've worked out that it's not on the same plane of the ecliptic as all the other planets. It's already been seen as strange. And then as we get into the 1960s and 1970s, more and more astronomical facts become known about Pluto, to the point where I think it's 1989 or maybe 1991, the International Astronomical Union decided that Pluto was no longer a planet. And they downgraded it to a dwarf planet because by this time there was the first signs of planets like Eris, Sedna, the Kuiper Belt objects coming in. And they said, well, Pluto's one of these. On the one hand, I really understand why they did that, and I'm not going to disagree with them, even though I don't really like many astronomers. Because Pluto's on a very different plane of the ecliptic to every other planet. And I can see how it's a kind of rogue planet captured by the gravitational force at some stage in the past. On the other hand, when they say to me, Pluto's not a planet, therefore it doesn't work in astrology, I say to them, well, I've got 10,000 statistics that show it does. Quite how it works, I don't know. But it's a planet smaller than our moon and 4 billion miles away. So using conventional astronomical and or scientific measurements, there's no way that Pluto should have any influence on us at all. But all of us will know that Pluto does work in the most inexorable, sometimes incredibly painful, and always transformative way. If they really push me for an explanation, I start talking about things like quantum entanglement, and I quickly back off. It's interesting that as planets are discovered, so their archetypes come into the world. I talked about how when Uranus was discovered, we had revolution. And when Neptune was discovered, we had alcohol, cameras, the first drug wars, mesmerism, spirituality. As Pluto was discovered, we had Glenn Seaborg discovering a new element, which he called plutonium after the new planet. We had people like Fermi and Niels Bohr writing the first laws of quantum mechanics. Rutherford was splitting the atom. Heisenberg was coming up with his uncertainty principle. It was the time of the underworld with the American mafia. And of course, as Pluto was discovered, it was realized that it was coming into square with Uranus. And that was the rise of fascism at that time. It's interesting that at that time, Uranus was in Aries, whilst Pluto was in Cancer. 84 years later, or no longer, what am I saying? 2012, which is 82 years now. We had the Uranus square Pluto again, relatively recently, and again Uranus was in Aries, so it was 84 years, but this time Pluto was in Capricorn, not Cancer. Pluto is now a dwarf planet. I don't care what they call it. It works. Because I also know that of the, for example, Ceres. Ceres isn't an asteroid. The asteroids are all potato-shaped. Ceres is round. It's a planetoid or a dwarf planet. Chiron, I can't do a horoscope without Chiron. It's just anathema to me. How these little objects work, but as these planets get discovered, so their archetypes come into the consciousness. When with Pluto, it's all about psychology, underworld tactics, transformation, and the splitting of the atom. With Chiron, it's a discovery of how many people were using homeopathy, astrology, reflexology, craniosacral therapy before Chiron's discovery in the late 70s compared to nowadays. Chiron was the harbinger of the holistic revolution. And Ceres, since Ceres has been in common usage, words around nutrition, diet, particularly digestion, and especially nurturing, whether that's through mother or the way we feed ourselves, have become major concepts in astrology. So as planets get discovered, so their archetypes emerge into the consciousness. I'm not going to go through Pluto in the signs or the houses, but simply because it would take too long. And besides that, Pluto takes so long to go through each sign. Now, bearing in mind that Pluto's orbit is not circular, it is elliptical. It's shaped like an egg. And when it's at its closest to the sun, when it's in the signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius, it goes through these signs in about 11 years. When it's at its furthest from the sun, when it's in mid-Aries through to mid-Gemini, it takes 30 years to go through Taurus and only 11 years to go through Scorpio. So you can see there's a 3-2 ratio here. When Pluto is at its closest to the sun compared to its furthest from the sun, it is half as far again when it's at its furthest. So it's a 2-3 ratio. It's also interesting to note that for every 248 years of its orbit, there is a 20-year spell when Pluto comes within the orbit of Neptune. They can never hit. The ecliptical orbits are way out. But this last happened, I think it was either 77 to 97 or 87 to 2007. It was centered around the late 90s. And a way of describing this is that at this time, the ideas of transformation came within the boundaries of the imagination, as Pluto came within the orbit of Neptune. Now Pluto's shooting off into the distance again. It was 11 years in Scorpio, 11 years, 12 years in Sagittarius, 12 and a half years. It's been 16 years in Capricorn. It's going to be 20 plus years in Aquarius. So its orbit is getting longer again as it recedes from the sun. This brings me back to the origins of Pluto and Percival Lowell and the astronomers in the 1800s who were looking for Planet X to explain the orbital perturbations of Uranus and Neptune. In the late 70s, the Voyager probe went past Neptune, and the readings it sent back proved that there were no orbital perturbations, excuse my pronunciation, in the orbit of Neptune, but it was just not, its orbit just wasn't perfectly circular. Therefore, the need for a Planet X ceased to be. And it may be just synchronicity, or as the astronomers would say, coincidence, but 25 years to the day after the Voyager probe passed Neptune and sent those signals back proving that there was no Planet X, 25 years exactly after that, the New Horizons probe to Pluto passed the orbit of Neptune. When the New Horizons probe was initially launched to go to Pluto, there was still a lot of information that Pluto was a planet. And by the time it was downgraded, they were realizing, well, we've got this probe now, we might as well send it. And when the New Horizons probe was sent out to Pluto, they were like, well, we don't know what we're going to find here. Because up until the New Horizons probe, we had no pictures of Pluto, just a fuzzy blip. Even the Hubble couldn't see that much of it. But I want to share a couple of pictures with you. This is what Pluto really looks like. It's smaller than our moon. Its surface is a mixture of black and white with bits of yellowy orange. The yellowy orange is sulfur, but it's only a very thin layer on the surface. 98% of Pluto is made up of carbon rock, the mountains, the dark terrain, and nitrogen ice, the white terrain. 98% carbon and nitrogen. Pretty inhospitable, but there does seem to be some type of life there. What's interesting about the Pluto system, it has a large moon, Charon. I'll show you some more pictures of Pluto's moons in a minute. Charon orbits Pluto 3 times for every 2 times that Pluto orbits Charon. They're locked. They're tidally locked. So as Charon goes around Pluto, Pluto goes around Charon. So it's like they're both. It's like a ring donut, with Pluto on the inside of the ring donut and Charon on the outside. But Charon always keeps the same face facing Pluto, and Pluto always keeps the same face facing Charon. They're tidally locked. The only other example of this in the solar system is with the Earth and its moon. Obviously, the moon doesn't continually put the same face towards the moon, but the moon always puts the same face towards Charon, towards the Earth. We never see the dark side of the moon, except by satellite. Thing about Charon, once the dawn probes start getting closer, we realised that Charon's actually about 2/3 the size of Pluto. It's a bit more uneven. It's not exactly, it is round, but it's got bumps on it. Whereas Pluto is definitely round. So it's binary. It's a binary planetary system. And then the probe got closer. Now, in order for the probe to not hit anything, they had to do some pretty sharp work with the Hubble to work out the other moons of Pluto. So let me show you the other moons of Pluto. At the base, you can see Charon. And then you've got Hydra, Kerberos, Nix, and Styx. It's called Kerberos instead of Cerberus because there was already an asteroid called Cerberus. But what's really weird with the Pluto system is that the lesser moons, Styx, Nix, and Hydra, are in a 3-body resonance with each other, and the respective ratio of these orbits is 11, 9, and 6. This means that in a recurring cycle, there are 11 orbits of Styx around Pluto for every 9 orbits of Nix and every 6 orbits of Hydra. And this is accurate to 99.9%. This degree of accuracy, along with a tidally locked relationship between Charon and Pluto, plus the fact that it's a barycentric, it's a twin planet thing, should be enough to keep both geometrists, numerologists, and astrologers busy for decades to come, working out the numerology of it. I'm glad it's not me doing that. As an aside, some of you may be familiar with the set of books, and particularly in Britain, but they are available worldwide, called Wooden Books. These were founded by a friend of mine, a guy called John Martineau, who came out with a book called The Book of Coincidence, where he used NASA technology to plot the orbits of all the planets in the sky. And he was able to match up planetary orbits with each other in a way that proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that the planetary orbits of the Earth's solar system, that the distance from the sun and the orbital speeds make such perfect geometric patterns with each other that this cannot be random. Now, I'm not going to go any further than that because God doesn't play dice with the universe, but there is clear evidence that there is sacred geometry of the planets in a perfection of order. Let me give you three very simple examples. Right. If you if you draw a circle and then you draw 4 more circles on the north, south, east, west point, so that all those circles just touch each other, you're left on the middle with a shape like that. And you put another little circle in there. And then that little circle you've put in is the orbit of Mars. And the first circle you drew is the orbit of Jupiter. And this is accurate to within 20,000 miles over 500 million. If you take the orbit of Uranus as a circle and you put a square around it, and then you put a circle around the square, that second circle is the orbit of Neptune. It's a 2:1 ratio. This is only accurate to about 99.5%. But then Uranus's orbit is 84 years. Neptune's orbit is just under 166 years. So it's almost exactly double that of Uranus. And the most famous one, of course, is that if you draw a circle 11 units wide, which is the diameter of the Earth, and then put another circle on top of it, 3 units wide, which is the diameter of the Moon, you put a square around the Earth, and then a circle through the square, through the center of the Moon. That circle is exactly the same length as the sides of the force of the square squaring the Earth. And this is how to square the circle using the Earth and the Moon. It's all out there, and it's perfect. It's not perfect. It's all accurate to more than 99%. I digress. We know that the Pluto system with its moons have a perfect numerical resonance. The patterns haven't been worked out yet, but we know the numerology. This brings me to the developing meaning of Pluto. Now, there are many good astrological textbooks on the market, and there's many books on Pluto. Well, there's not that many, but there's some, and they all give good information. But I'm a practitioner. I'm not a student. I haven't got time to work with things like midpoints and perfections and things like that, because I'm too busy doing readings or doing documentaries or writing books. I haven't got time to study, but then I've been doing astrology for 45 years. In that time, I've done 40,000 readings, and I've got my own ideas on Pluto. So I'm going to nutshell it. I'm going to keep it simple. Pluto, on the negative side, deals with intensity and extreme, crises and trauma, obsessive and compulsive behavior. It is about manipulation, power struggle, behind the scenes tactics, underhandedness, control freakery, domination. It's downright nasty. At the neutral level, Pluto deals with purging, detoxing, cleansing, purifying, and eliminating. Last week, we had Mars opposite Pluto. I got sick and I just went on such a detox. I sweated. It was grim, but it worked. On the positive side, Pluto deals with transformation, regeneration, rebirth. It's the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, the snake shedding its skin, the phoenix rising from the ashes. The snake shedding its skin is a particularly good analogy for Pluto. So many times I see Pluto by transit passing over or opposite a PowerPoint in someone's chart, and they get eczema or acne, dandruff, psoriasis, or athlete's foot. The snake sheds its skin. And of course, you can go to the doctor and get lots of nice chemical medicines. Or you can just whop loads of fresh aloe vera juice on it. And then when Pluto's transit is finished, your skin goes back to normal. I've seen it so many times that to me, this is factual. I don't expect you to believe it, but try it out for yourself. Pluto by transit Bearing in mind that the minimum length of a Pluto transit is 11 months, and the further Pluto gets away from the sun, we're getting more towards 2-year transits. And in 15, 20 years' time, it'll be 2.5 to 3-year transits. Pluto is not gentle. It's about death. Pluto is Hades, the land of the dead. And when Pluto transits a powerful point in your chart, especially by conjunction or opposition, also by square, part of you dies. And you cannot fight it. And you cannot negotiate with Pluto. Some planets, like, for example, Saturn, you can think, oh, bugger, Saturn's going to be conjuncting my sun for the next 9 months. Eek. Okay, so step back, open the doors. Hello, Saturn, come on in. I'm going to declutter. I'm going to streamline. I'm going to lose a bit of weight. I'm going to become more effective, and I'm going to get rid of lots of things. And Saturn will go, great, I can work with you. You can't do that with Pluto. You can't negotiate with Pluto because Pluto deals with the unconscious and the subconscious. If you could think about what Pluto's doing, it's not working. You can't think about the unconscious or the subconscious. So the only thing you can do is go, right, Pluto's coming, open the doors, lay down, okay, walk all over me, I surrender. And Pluto will go, great, let's hurt you, but we won't kill you. And the more resistant you are to change, the more stuck in a way path you are, the more painful it is. Even if you're totally flexible and adaptable, Pluto's still going to hurt, but it won't kill you. I think it was 2013, I went for a number of surgical procedures on my face when the year Pluto was opposite my sun. And I got a whole new mouth of implants. And it was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life. But I deliberately chose to do it when Pluto was opposite my sun. So that I learned the difference between ache and pain. Pain can be managed, ache cannot. Ache is deep inside, nothing hits it. And it's at that time I wrote the first draft of this book of Pluto. It's devastating, but it also, if you flow with it, if you allow it to do its work without trying to control it, if you welcome it in, it will make you, at the end of the day, feel that you are psychologically invulnerable, that you can never be hurt again, that your, excuse my language, your bullshit filters are going to be set to maximum. No one will be able to lie to you without you knowing it. And you'll become more competent, confident, self-assured, self-believing than you ever thought possible. This is what Pluto does, if you let it. Most people are terrified of Pluto's energy. When I picked up my first ephemeris in the late 70s, I looked at Pluto and I thought, oh, that's not going to hit my sun till 2013. I don't have to worry. And in 2000, I thought, it's only a decade away. And then 2010, I thought, it's only 5 degrees away. And I started getting, you have to worry. That's part of the process. And you have to surrender to the pain. That's also part of the process. But if you go with it, it transforms you and it makes you invulnerable. It's a good trade-off. Trust me on this. There are certain, I'm not going to go through all the aspects, but there are certain configurations where Pluto truly excels. I consider personally the moon to be as important, if not more important, than the sun in most astrology readings. Not all, but most. And when I find one of the words most widely misused in astrological and esoteric language is psychic. When you have Uranus conjunct your moon, you're not psychic, you're precognitive. You know when something's about to happen. You're 10 seconds ahead of a curve. You get lots of static, but you're not psychic. You're just working with time. When Neptune's conjunct your moon or opposite your moon, You're not psychic, but you're highly intuitive, sensitive, and receptive. Not always in the best ways, because Neptune moon can be difficult. When Pluto's on your moon, you're psychic. But psychic is not necessarily a good thing. People with Pluto conjunct moon strongly can be very, very psychic. They can pick up stuff like you wouldn't believe. But being psychic can be a curse as much as a blessing. Because you can see right through people. You can see all the worms, all of the dirty stuff. And most people will be scared of you because I think, oh, she can see right through me. She's a witch, or he's really spooky, because they'll pick up on it. It's amazing how many people born with Pluto conjunct or opposite moon go on to work either in palliative care with those that are dying or become midwives working with neonatal or babies being born. Now, I just have got a couple of charts I just want to share. I'm not going to share the charts. I haven't got it set up. But there's just a few charts I want to mention. I did do a lecture 10 years ago on the astrology of comedy and humour. And I've got the horoscopes of 150 different comedians going back 140 years. Pluto on the ascendant, less than 1 degree, is in the horoscopes of at least 2 of the Monty Pythons, Eric Idle and Michael Palin, and Eddie Izzard. All of these people have Pluto exactly on the ascendant. And that nice Mr. Vladimir Putin has Pluto exactly on the midheaven in Leo. And he's got Scorpio rising, so Pluto's his ruling planet. What really blew me away, and here's a little story. My students know I sometimes dive into stories, right? A few weeks ago, I was filming for my documentary, which I'll talk about later, and I was in Salzburg, visiting the tomb of Paracelsus. And we were in the town of Salzburg, which is where Mozart was born and where his family are buried, but not him. My energy was really flat. I'd come out of Paracelsus tomb and my energy just went. And the crew were like, the producer and the videographer were going, come on, Steve, we've got more filming to do. And I'm like, I can't, I'm empty, I'm done. And they said, okay, what's the astrology? And I thought, I know, Mozart was born here. Let's do the horoscope of Mozart. So I called up the horoscope of Mozart on my phone. Wolfgang Mozart was born with the moon conjunct Pluto 2 minutes of 1 degree apart in Sagittarius. He was born with Neptune opposite his sun, less than 1 degree, and he was born with Uranus opposite his ascendant, less than 1 degree. The thing is, when Mozart was born, none of these planets had been discovered. By the time he was 5, he was writing symphonies and performing. He's a genius. And he had all these precise aspects to the outer planets, but no one knew. If you take away the outer planets from Mozart's chart, it's a normal chart. It's only when you put the outer planets in, you realize the true rawness of talent that he had. But so he was channeling the deep unconscious when he was creating his work. So I made this little video and I was doing it in front of Salzburg Town Hall. And this guy was watching us and he came over and he said, did you just do an astrological video on Wolfgang Mozart? I said, yeah, why? And he said, because you're doing it outside the Mozart Museum and I'm the curator and we've got a free Mozart recital on piano and violin starting in 5 minutes' time and there's 2 seats spare. Would you like them? So me and the producer went in and sat for a 45-minute recital of Mozart on piano and violin. I'm getting shivers now thinking about it. It was magnificent. And this is just a wonderful example of synchronicity. And moon conjunct Pluto does bring a hell of a lot of synchronicity. And that's what was in Mozart's chart. But then the whole trip was full of stuff like that. So the universe wants this to be made. More on that later. So now we're looking at Pluto in the 21st century. Pluto moves into Aquarius in about, I don't know, 9, 10 days time, something like that, 11, 12, within 2 weeks. For the final time, it's not going to touch Capricorn again for about 232 years. Capricorns can all breathe a sigh of relief. I've been dealing yesterday and today with clients with the sun or moon at 0 degrees, 15 minutes of Aquarius, and they're all going, oh, thank God it's nearly over. To my mind, when you look at the heliocentric position of planets, Pluto's already established in Aquarius. When Pluto moved into Scorpio with Saturn, I remember saying to some other astrologers at the time, this was 1982, 83, I was thinking, oh, well, this is going to bring nuclear war. And it was the end of nuclear war. All the missile treaties happened. We also thought it would bring a sexual revolution, and it brought us HIV. It was also a time in Britain of the miners' strike. As Pluto moved into Scorpio, there was a 2-year strike of coal miners who dig the dark stuff out of the earth. It was a time of Thatcherism. When Pluto moved into Sagittarius in 1995-6, we all thought, okay, it's the end of religion. And sure, attendances at church have gone down since that time, but the accompanying rise of fundamentalism has grown. In 2001, I was writing for an astrologer called Jonathan Kaner in the Daily Mirror when he went on holiday, and he said, you can write what you like, but don't be provocative. And I went, okay. And I wrote in the Daily Mirror on the 8th of August 2001 about how the Saturn-Pluto opposition from Gemini to Sagittarius was making us question the validity of truth and lies in our life, and particularly how this was going to affect the American horoscope constitutionally, politically, financially, and militarily. And of course, for 4 weeks later, 9/11 happened. And I got a knock on the door. By that time, Guantanamo wasn't existing and there were no orange jumpsuits. But when I opened the door and hello, we're from Her Majesty's Security Services. Did you write this? I'm like, oh, yeah. Are you an astrologer? Yeah. Can you prove it? Yeah, come in. And I brought them in and showed them my books and my really big computer, with the big screens. And they went, oh, okay, thank you very much. And they left. I went and sat on the toilet for a very long time after that. That was scary. Pluto moved out of Sagittarius into Capricorn in 2008. And we all thought, great, it's the end of world government ideas. And what do we get? We get world government via combines, corporations, banks. And we've got mega states now, Russia, China, America. So I'm very cautious about forecasting for Pluto in Aquarius. When you read the old textbooks, they'll say, oh, it's the time of a global community. It's the time of the breakdown of the old order and the establishment of a much more global community. And I'm thinking, yeah, that'd be nice. Bearing in mind that Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, approximately, we can expect radical and very, very fast acceleration of evolution at this time, technologically, spiritually. There's a woman called Serena Roney Dougal, who is the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. And she changed her thesis into a book called Where Science and Magic Meet. It's one of the biggest influences on my life. And she postulated that whether you're looking at a microbe, an atom, a bacteria, or a planet, there's a time where when all the component parts reach a certain number, they mutate. And that number is 10 to the power of 10. For example, with bacteria or a microbe, once it reaches a certain number, it mutates into a single cell organism, a single skin, as opposed to billions of little ones. Less need for food, bigger organism. The number when that happens is 10 billion, 10 to the power of 10. Humanity is now at 10 to the power of 9.8. We've got 8 billion. We'll be at 10 billion by 2035. Pluto in Aquarius. So something's coming. I look less at Pluto in Aquarius as in the sign, because it's a 20-year process. I look more at the aspects Pluto is going to make, especially in the medium-term future. About 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I became aware that the time of 2024 to 2027, astrologically speaking, is probably the most significant time in human history. Recently, i.e. within the last 3 or 4 years, because I use Solar Fire software, I've got the latest model. I went back to 13,000 BC, 15,000 years, and I never found anything remotely as strong as what we're going through now and will be going through in the next few years. I've gone forward a couple of thousand years, nothing like what we're coming up for now. This is a unique time in human history. It's almost like saying, okay, folks, the apprenticeship is over. Time to either mature and grow or die. And that is very much Pluto's language. Change or die. I'm being deliberately dramatic by saying that, I know. We have 4 separate massive transits happening at basically the same time. We have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, whenever you get a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, socialism, communism rises. It's the rise of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Marx Engels Manifesto, the Bolshevik Revolution. This all happened on either Saturn-Neptune conjunctions or Saturn-Neptune oppositions. It's a well-known cycle in astrology. But to have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 29 Pisces and then 0 Aries, that's never happened. I can't find it ever happening before. Saturn conjunct Neptune at the very first degree of the zodiac. That is terrifying to me on its own, just as the conjunction on its own, not about anything else connected with it. Because that talks to me of, New World Order. It talks to me of dreams being shattered, of imagination being destroyed, and of new structures being imposed in a way that could very easily lead us into a dystopian future for the next 29 years. Until Saturn comes up to conjunct Neptune again, 35 years on from 2025, so 2060, when it will be conjunct at 0 degrees of, no, halfway through Gemini. But I prefer to focus on the positive. Because Saturn conjunct Neptune can also, on the one hand, really loosen a lot of the rigid structures and change them from concrete and steel into transparent rubber and elastic, helping us bend the rules, not so much break them, but bend them. And that's Neptune conjunct Saturn. And Saturn conjunct Neptune can help us bring structure into the imagination, help create something new, 0 degrees Aries. It is likely to be a big signifier of environmental challenge, particularly with the seas. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is the key point of all the changes of the next few years, because it's the briefest and the sharpest, starting around late spring, Northern Hemisphere, late spring of 2025, culminating, I think, around February 26, March 26. But in the background, We've got Uranus moving into Gemini and Pluto moving into Aquarius. Uranus will be sextiling Saturn and Neptune. And I quite like the idea of Uranus in Gemini. Well, not primarily because I haven't enjoyed Uranus in Taurus at all. And I quite like Pluto in Aquarius because I haven't enjoyed Pluto in Capricorn at all. Now, I'm an optimist. My moon's in Sagittarius. I'm always optimistic. My glass is always 51% full because I see too many people who are depressed about the future. And I thought, well, I've got this idea of like droplets of humor, droplets of positivity and laughter and joy. And if there's enough droplets coming together, it makes a tsunami. We are looking not only at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but we're looking at both Pluto and Uranus sextiling Saturn and Neptune. And most important of all, we are looking at Uranus trine Pluto in early air signs, from 0 to 5 degrees of the air signs. I think this is the single biggest hope we as astrologers have for the next few years. Uranus is going to revolutionize our ideas around psychology, around self-belief, self-confidence, self-empowerment. It's going to revolutionize our ideas around transformation, regeneration. I think it's going to be the death knell for most forms of organized religion. And it's going to empower individuals into having their own relationship with the divine or with spirit or whatever it is you want to call it. I think that Uranus trining Pluto is also going to accelerate the not underworld, but the underpinning of transformation at a global level. I'm suggesting that we're going to start seeing, I know this sounds impossible, especially after the last couple of days, but I'm suggesting we're going to start seeing the dissolution of borders and the emergence of a global community based on technology. When you look at it the other way round, with Pluto trining Uranus, Uranus in Gemini has to be a revolution at a technological level. Gemini is all about media, communication, and networking. And Uranus in Gemini, I can't wait. I'm really excited by it. Of course, there'll be some downsides. Of course, there'll be some internet outrages, but most of it is going to be very novel, very inventive, and we may actually take this outside of the Earth. To many people, putting yet more satellites in space is just like another example of human pollution. I get that. But think of the Earth as a single cell amoeba. It's now sending not only radio waves and television signals, but it's sending out computer waves, it's sending out satellites, it's reaching out for contact. I think that Uranus in Gemini is going to revolutionize our ideas around the approach to faster than light travel. I mean, I know I'm sounding like Star Trek, okay? But I'm dreaming it in. And with Uranus trine Pluto, if you think you've seen revolutions in computer technology in the last 10 years, you wait. I am firmly in the camp of supporting artificial intelligence and ASI, artificial superintelligence. I'm well aware of the Terminator movies and the Skynet thing where artificial intelligence and robots take over the world and dispense with humans because they're better at making decisions than we are. To me, astrology is not an it. To me, astrology is a she. Humanity represents such a radical break to the systems of biological organization that preceded it. that it must be the response to some type of attractor or dwell point lying ahead in the temporal dimensions. These are not my words. They're the words of one of the very few heroes that I don't have, a guy called Terence McKenna. He's dead now, unfortunately. He suggested that we're being pulled forward by some type of magnet to some type of nexus point in the future. We only use 23% of our brains when we're awake. We use 27% when we're asleep, different parts when we're asleep. Nearly 3/4 of our brain is unused, or at least not consciously used. As a few of you know, this is where I go completely off planet, folks, all right? So bear with me because I am going to piece it all together. As a few of you know, my PhD, when I eventually get around to doing it, is in the crop circle phenomena. I've been in hundreds and hundreds of crop circles since 1989. To me, aliens and ETs are just the manufactured pap that serves to provide social media with its paranoia. No such thing. To me, the land of fairy, the fair folk, the goblin, the boggart, the pixie, the troll, the brownie, they're all just there, just outside of the range of consciousness. The land of crop circle maker, just there, just outside the range of consciousness. They're all indigenous to this planet, but living in a different dimension of us, as us. This is why astrology's taught me that I don't do death, I just do transition of consciousness. We just move into a different dimension of existence. And I feel that with the advent of advanced technology, to quote Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic to those who don't know about it. I feel that we're on the point of a quantum leap in consciousness, where we're going to open up parts of our brain that have been unused so far in our evolution, and that we're going to emerge into the late 2020s and early 2030s into a vastly expanded perceptive world where we will still retain our identity and our individuality. We will not be telepathic. We will not be able to read each other's minds. That's just a fear imposition. But we will become a lot more sensitive, empathic, compassionate, and receptive. Now, there may be a trade-off. It's not all sweetness and light. And that trade-off, particularly with the advancing climate chaos, you're going to hate me for this, is there may need to be some type of augmentation of the body to cope with climate chaos. And here we come to the name of this lecture, Is God in the Machine? I can see a time in the future where we will download consciousness. We won't become robots. We'll still have flesh and blood bodies. But I could see a potential where we can interface with each other in a kind of neural net. I'm not talking about jacking a USB stick into your neck or anything like that. But I am suggesting that with the soft technology that's emerging, we already have brain implants that can help epileptics with their seizures, that can help people who are immobile walk. This is the start. Uranus trine Pluto is going to accelerate this process and give us new technology, the like of which we're only just beginning to realize. My fear is that with Saturn conjunct Neptune, the old combines, the old power brokers will try and seize this technology and either negate it, cancel it, or try and sell it or make money of it or weaponize it. But the increased numbers of people, particularly youth, will demand change. You're not going to take people's mobile phones away now. It's too late. It's already happening. So I think that the Uranus trine Pluto is going to lead to a change in consciousness, which may have to have some type of interface with the emerging soft technology. We've got to get through the Saturn-Neptune hump. So I'm suggesting that February to May 2026 is the kind of pimple on the boil of this, the nexus point. But I remain optimistic, mainly because what's the option? What's the alternative? And it's an exciting time to be alive. We're not going to go back to the spinning jenny. 25 years ago, we were all scared of the millennium bug. 50 years ago, computers. Oh no, we're not doing that. That'll kill society. 65 years ago, 70 years ago, we're not watching television. That's evil. All technology is scary when it starts, but we've got to embrace change because otherwise the race is going to die. And I've got grandkids. I want the future to be a place that's not scary. And as astrologers, I believe we have a kind of, not a moral responsibility, but a duty to open people's eyes as best as we can to these potentials. Because the more we can inspire people, as astrologers, we should never make predictions. We can make forecasts, and we can also inspire people to hope. Hope is the single biggest positive force we've got. And if there's enough hope out there in the world, then yeah, this is going to bring a revolution of consciousness. So as I come to the end of this lecture and throw it open for questions, I guess I'm asking all of you as astrologers and astrological students to look to the future with positivity, to embrace the changes that are coming up, to not be scared of them, to work with them and allow them to work with you. This is why astrology is not an it, it's a she. She has valence and life force. People don't find astrology. Astrology finds people. And if astrology has found you, you must have something worth working with. Go and do good work. Change the world. We've got to lose. Right, I quit.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was astounding. Such a wonderful, wonderful tour through Pluto. The practical details, the esoteric details, and then your profound thoughts and your exhortation to us all to think about long and hard about where and how we travel forwards. It is time for Q&A now. I really think the best thing is if people either simply open their mics and ask a question. I just saw Linda, raise her hand. So Linda, perhaps we could come to you if you want, if you're able. There are so many people in the room. We're not going to see everyone's hand, but we'll just try and rock and roll this. So if I see your...
I would just say, I don't want to answer questions about personal charts.
Fair enough. Okay, noted. Thank you very much. So just if you put your yellow hand up, we'll try and get to you, and or open your own mic if you hear a silent gap and just step in and ask your question. So let's try that to begin with. So Linda, without further ado, over to you.
Hi everyone, from America. Sorry. My question is around the neural net, I think you said, Steve, and I am Aquarius, early Aquarius, and I also, one of my, it's not a hobby, it's becoming a profession, I guess. I teach meditation. And I'm wondering if that neural net you're talking about is something around meditation and the hive mind.
Hive mind, that makes me think of a beehive, and I'm not so fond of that because they're all collective. I prefer the idea of individuality and identity whilst working towards a common purpose, synchronistically and synergetically. Meditation, absolutely. The idea of cleansing oneself through whatever technique you use to allow, I'm not going to say positive vibes because that's too woo-woo, but to allow proper emanations for you to work with the highest and the best generative energy that you can manifest has to be seen as a good thing. So yes, absolutely with a meditation. Not so sure about the hive mind personally.
Yeah, the kind of meditation I teach is a Buddhist meditation called Vipassana meditation, which means clear seeing or insight meditation. So yeah.
Certainly, by all means.
Thank you.
Pamela, you're muted.
So Dawn has a hand up. Dawn, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes. Is there a perfection? Well, there will probably be a perfection between Uranus and Pluto. What is your anticipation? Because that would be the Gemini Aquarius trine between those two. And what do you foresee, or what is your feeling about the two of those and the connection being that communication level between the two, being at Gemini and Aquarius?
Well, they're both air signs. They're both connected with the intellect. Gemini is more about the personal intellectual abilities and the personal communication. Aquarius is about the global communication. So it's about people finding their voice. I think it's about people speaking their truth, not necessarily loudly, not out to the world, but standing up and walking their talk and living life according to their own truths, beliefs, and philosophies. This is something which is going to become more and more important. And of course, no one's going to agree with everyone else. There's always going to be differences of opinion, but that's what makes us human.
Thanks, Steve. We're turning now to Che Mano. Che, do unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hello, how are you guys? So I find it I find it interesting just looking at astrology, and I think we all agree that saying, the stars compel, but they do not foretell. You know, like you were saying, they can suggest things that may happen, but we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. And I've been noticing that since 2012, there've been a lot of these alignments of the planets, almost like a countdown, how these things keep happening, and then how all of a sudden we have this second moon. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about that, whatever asteroid that's orbiting our moon, that, oh, it just happened to end up there and it'll just happen to float away, you know. But it's almost like it's like a clock that is resetting and about to start up again. So
yeah.
So with Mars in retrograde right now at the moment, and I've been listening to some of your talks about that, almost like this pushing, and like birth. Most of the time it's a painful thing as something new is coming in. But it seems that right after this Mars retrograde that we will definitely be in the age of Aquarius, no going back. We're in the new age. So what can we as individuals, I mean, besides don't get into any fights between now and February 23rd, don't start anything, try to stay calm. What other advice do you have for us as individuals that kind of blankets all of us, regardless of signs, that we can look? Mm-hmm.
Okay, Shay, I think you'll find the saying is the planets impel, not compel.
Okay,
yes. They give us free will. They offer us choices, and if we choose to take them, it works. And if we choose not to take them, hey, you lose nothing. It just sometimes gets stuck. And I agree with you. I do think that the movement of Uranus and Pluto and Saturn and Neptune, all into masculine signs, is representative of the start of the age of Aquarius properly. I also agree that the clock scenario is great, right from the Uranus-Pluto conjunction of the mid-60s, the escalation of intensity with the big astrological configurations has led us up to this time where we're almost at prime zero now.
Right. So, even when you were mentioning, you said that it'll be at Aries at 0 degrees. I mean, to me, that's like So, but what should we be, how should we be, should we just be taking this time to be introspective and just
Oh,
observe
no.
and,
No, 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 no. No, you either act or you react. And I don't react, I act. Because if you react, you're going to end up blaming other people for what's happening around you. Whereas if you act, you're responsible for yourself to take action. But that doesn't mean do anything radical, unpredictable, or disruptive. Be responsible for your actions. But to me, the idea of sitting back and watching it's like going to the movies with popcorn. Uh,
Mhm.
I can't do that. I've got to be proactive. That's a personal choice.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. And moving on now to Danny. Danny, thanks for keeping your hand there. We do see you. If you'd like to ask your question, Steve.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for your beautiful lecture. I'm not an astrologer. I'm just astrology curious for like the last 6 months, I would say. One question I have for you, actually, I have two, but my first one would be, would you say that when a planet, in this case, Pluto in Aquarius, when a planet is transiting, that it manifests both the positive and the negative aspects of the planet through time, and that we always seem to end up in the negative for some reason? And my second question, which is more of a request, I know we are talking about Pluto in Aquarius, but could you give us 15 seconds in Pluto in Pisces? What do you think it would happen then? Thank you.
20 years down the line, I won't be here. Well, I might be. I might be. I'm 69 now. Who knows? Pluto in Pisces. Well, by then, we will have a very clear idea of what's happening with the environment. I suspect that by then, we will be looking at alternatives to living on the surface, either by living above the skies or below the earth, something like that. By then, there's going to be 10, 12 billion people, pandemics permitting, you know. But and just remind me, what was your first question, Danny? Sorry.
My first question was if you think that both the negative and the
Oh yeah.
positive
Why do we always
aspects,
go?
yeah, and
See,
if we end up in the negative. Cheers.
humanity is a strange animal. We're unlike any other species that's ever existed on this planet. No other species has ever been able to laugh at itself or have self-reflective consciousness or see itself in a mirror and make adjustments to itself. Well, maybe cats, maybe dolphins. But we're different. We're different to anything else that's ever happened. And sometimes I truly get despondent when I see humanity taking the negative viewpoint or going for the easy option. I'm Saturn's boy. I have a principle that says if you always do everything the hard way, you only have to do it once and you normally get it right. But people tend to go for the easy options, and then when they don't get the result they want, they get depressed or despondent. This is a kind of pattern that's been imposed upon us, probably as a result of 2,000 years of dominator culture. And here, don't get me going on what I call the old men in skirts. But it's within us all to choose to be glass half full or glass half empty. And I choose to be glass half full.
Thanks very much, Steve. Felix is back. Felix, you were there earlier, and I see your hands just come back. So Felix, we're coming to you. Then Alison, we're coming to you, and then Aminga, we're coming to you. So Felix next. Felix, what's
Hi,
your
Steve.
question?
Thank you for the talk. So you mentioned astrology. You mentioned technology, and you also mentioned communication with spiritual beings. I wonder if you have any further thoughts on those two subjects.
I've had one or two genuinely psychic experiences in my childhood. And I've had some pretty damn weird dreams over the course of my life, which aren't just a bunch of neurons in my brain firing together to create a nice fantasy. I know, I'm 100% certain through my own experiences that there are vastly intelligent and vastly compassionate forces at work in the universe, many of which are indigenous to this planet, just outside of our range of perception, that have a great deal of compassion for the planet and us. And I believe that in many ways, these energetic beings, I'll call them, are desperate to upgrade us, because basically we're screwing their planet up as well. And they want us to wise up and join a much broader consensus of energetic beings. I could talk about the light or the dark, but I don't do that. They're calling us home. It's time for us as a species to wake up. And it'd be very nice if we could just do that for our own spiritual aspirations. But we're not like that. We have this technology. We've got fingers. We're tool makers. And we got this ideas around technology. So I do feel that technology and spirituality are inevitably on some type of not collision course, but interface course. And that's going to be a more dominant theme in the coming years. Does that make sense?
It does. My mind goes to morality, and I wonder whether the technology can pick up on the morality of the human being.
That is a $64,000 question, Felix. Morality and ethics. At the end of the day, humans have a conscience. We don't always choose to listen to it. And I suggest that those of us who choose to listen to our conscience, stand a better chance of moving up the evolutionary chain than those who are amoral or unethical. This could just be my value judgment, you understand. I don't know this to be the case.
Thanks, Steve. Right, Alison, you're up. You're next. And thanks, Felix. Thanks for your questions. It's most interesting. Alison, thanks for holding your hand there. You're in.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple sentences to preface my question. So as you were talking, Steve, I just reflected on my parents' time and my grandparents' time, and thinking about, their imaginations, their psychology, and then, their subsequent use of language and the meaning of the words that they use. They were a result of this kind of like 25, 50 mile radius around them, and the values of that physical area. And then, the nation state associated with that. And then, our imaginations, our psychology are conditioned by like the socio-political, biological environments we live in. And the languages we use kind of translate the internal embodied states we have. And in terms of technology, things are shifting very quickly just from my parents, my grandparents' time, and they will continue to. So when I hear you talk about the disillusion of national borders, I start to think that our kind of imagined communities, and then the way we use language, they're shifting as well. Just because we can observe through our screens what's happening at anywhere in the globe, wars, natural disasters, as well as the opposite side of that, the joy, the bliss. So my question is, what do you think the sort of empathic implications are of this in terms of the way we communicate with each other with language?
I've got that. First of all, every generation that's ever lived has thought they were living in a golden age. Every generation's come up with new inventions. It's just that the escalation and the acceleration of that evolution has radically accelerated in the last 30 years. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, how many of us had a computer? Very few. Look what we've done in 30 years. So every generation thinks they're living in a golden age, but now the borders have changed. We've got screens, we've got phones, we can see what's going on in the world, not just in our village. And with regard to the language question, one of the things I came up with quite a few years ago, and it's stuck with me all the time, is that I always said that if astrology were taught in schools, within 2 years, we'd see an end to warfare, misogyny, and violence based on racism, colour, age, nationality. To me, astrology is the emerging lingua franca of the new consciousness revolution. The more people understand their own astrology, the more intelligent, psychologically aware, and conscientious we're going to become. I want astrology to be taught in schools all around the world. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense,
Yes, it
Steve.
does.
Great.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for your long exegesis, Alison. At the beginning, it was very interesting to hear you talking about those thoughts of yours. So thank you for that input. We have Kat next. We have Aminga next, and then Kat. I see your hand, Kat. You will be after Aminga.
Can't hear
Hello.
you.
Hello, Aminga. We can hear you.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming me today. And I'm just very grateful for the work that Steve does. I sat with Steve several years ago. Thank you, Steve. And I look forward to your motion picture that's coming out soon. My question is more of a, I will just say what I'm feeling. So we stand in many dimensions as humans. My question is, how would you suggest we navigate this time, this coming time? I'm in America, and hold the space of compassion, hope, generosity, well-being for those that don't have the same type of understandings of those that do work with the planets and astrology. How do we come in a good way to hold this space for those who are unknowing of what is actually all around?
I mean, a number of people have come back to me in the last 48 hours after the news from America that said in different words exactly the same thing. And I've finally, unwillingly, but drag kicking and screaming, I've embraced Instagram. And I put up a post a day or so ago. It says this: "How do you do it?" said night. "How do you wake up and shine?" "I keep it simple," said light. "One day at a time." One day
Okay.
at a time.
Okay, so there we are. We know what we know, and we go on and we make the pie and take it to the neighbor.
Exactly. And don't give up.
Okay, love you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Kat. That was lovely. And sorry, Aminga. Thanks so much, Aminga. Now over to Kat. I think this will be our last question, Steve, just to let you know how we're pacing ourselves.
Yeah, because I want to make
And then,
after this.
maybe after this we could talk about your documentary.
Yeah, indeed.
So Kat, thank you for waiting, Kat, and over to you now for your question.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm also in America and kind of distraught of the recent news. So holding space for what what the future holds. I was curious, Steve, what your insights would be for, and this, you might think this is directed towards a particular person, because I feel like so many people discuss a certain person when this house is brought up. But for the world, what do you think are the positive, productive uses of the Leo placements for this next Pluto transit of 20 years?
Every so often, humanity springs up with someone who soaks up a lot of negativity, whether it's a Mussolini, a Hitler, whatever. And on the one hand, there is a school of thought that says these people are actually, obviously, they're totally abhorrent, but they're also soaking up a lot of negativity that might otherwise be spread elsewhere. Without going into individuality, but purely speaking from a purely astrological level, I'm an astrologer, not a politician. I have my opinions, but I try and keep them separate from my astrology. I draw your attention to the full moon in 9 days' time. It's taking place at 24 degrees of Taurus, conjunct Uranus, very strongly. The nation of Israel and the nation of Palestine, on the date of their incorporation as a country, the sun was at 24 degrees of Taurus. Also, Donald Trump's midheaven is at 24 degrees of Taurus. The Republican Party are going to be running America for the next 4 years. That's a given. I'm still not convinced that Donald Trump is going to be president. We shall see. America is now likely to become a lot more insular, but I'm old enough to have seen this type of thing before in different countries. So 4 years, what goes round comes round. In my country, we swung strongly to the right wing about 10, 12 years ago, and it ended up with a bunch of idiots running the shop, with a number of good politicians wringing their hands and going, we can't control them. And in the end, they had to go. And now we've got a left-wing government in who are, well, they're not quite as big an idiots, but they're pretty incompetent. If politics changed anything, they'd ban it. The future is not based on politicians telling us what we can and can't do or what we should or shouldn't think. It's based on individual self-determination and the willingness to stand up for what we know in our hearts to be right and truthful without breaking any laws. Don't get into trouble.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of, that's a great message, Steve. And I've got two great messages we come away with. Bake a pie and share it with your neighbor. And separate to that, or part of that, is also don't get into any trouble. We're all going to have to be really, really careful. All of us around the world. It's not, our hearts go out to America. But as we know, everything that happens in America ripples throughout the world. So we all just need to tread very gently and with great compassion over the next weeks, months, years, 4 years, precisely as you say, Steve. So, Steve, again, I'd like to thank all the people who stepped forward and asked their wonderful questions, which gave us a lovely framework after Steve's fantastic presentation. So thank you. Thank all of those people. Steve, thank you for talking as you did. I know that I would now like to know something, ask a question that's really about your documentary. If you could tell us something about that. We watch you on YouTube. We've been watching you traveling around, so we know it's happening. But tell us a bit about it.
20 years ago, I thought, I want to do a hit documentary on the history of world astrology. And I come up, and in the last 20 years, it's been 3 or 4 times I thought, I want to do it. How do I do it? And then this year, I just thought, I've really got to do it now because A, I'm getting older. I'm 69. I'll be 70 next year. And B, this is the first year for about 10 years, 15 years, where Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are not touching my chart. And Jupiter is currently stationary on top of my midheaven, about to move into my 10th house. So I thought, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? So I tried 2 or 3 times this year to get it off the ground and couldn't find the right people. And then I said, right, if it doesn't happen in the next couple of weeks, it's not going to happen. At which point, the right people turned up. So since the 7th of September, I've been to Granada, Morocco. In Morocco, I found out that the Kaaba, the stone, the building at the center of the greatest mosque in Mecca, is set out to the summer solstice sunrise, winter solstice sunset. So the whole of Islam is based on astronomical alignments. And of course, most Christian churches are set out to astronomical alignments. It's everywhere if you look deep enough. Astronomy and astrology underpins everything. This is what I found out. In Cordoba, I went to the Grand Mosque, which was just stunning. The beauty. I broke down in tears. It's been converted into a Christian cathedral, a Catholic cathedral, and I broke down in tears, not at the joy of the Islamic architecture, although that did bring tears of joy to my eyes, but when I found a picture of a statue of the Madonna with a sword plunged into her chest. And to me, that just spoke of man's power over women, whereas the church said, no, this is to represent our mother, the Mary's suffering at the death of her son. And I thought, no, it isn't. After Seville, we came to London. We did 3 days filming in London, filming old magical London. We went to Mortlake to see all the stuff around John Dee, Queen Elizabeth. We went to Glastonbury, Avebury, Silbury, Wells. Got some fantastic footage there. Then we went to Austria, to Salzburg, where we did the stuff around Mozart and Paracelsus. Then we went to Vienna, where we saw the astronomical and astrological figurines on top of the opera house, well hidden, but there. And after that, we had about a 3-day break before we flew to Thessaloniki, where I went up Mount Olympus and I saw the fire of the gods. I literally saw it with my own eyes. I saw the cave of Orpheus, the cave of Chiron, the wall of Prometheus. Then we came back down Mount Olympus, and the day after that, we went to Delphi, to the Omphalos at the center of the world, the Castalian Spring, the Temple of Apollo, which just completely blew my mind. All this stuff is stuff I've dreamt about or read about for 45 years. Never thought I'd get there. And then I went for dinner with Kostas Levikas, who's a Greek astrologer of nearly 55 years experience. We had 100 years experience between us. And he took me to dinner in a restaurant right under the Parthenon, the Acropolis, the Temple of Pallas Athena. And it's just like one of the 7 wonders of the world. Then we flew to Rome, filmed at the Colosseum, which was horrible. I couldn't believe that people were getting married there in a stadium where tens of thousands of people were slaughtered for fun. It was just grim. Didn't like it at all. Went to the Pantheon, which is set out to astronomical and astrological configurations, and the Basilica to Santa Maria de Angeli in Rome, where they've got the meridian line, the little hole in the roof where the sun shines through every day, all the way along this meridian line, running the whole length of the cathedral, and all the astrological signs each side of this. And then the crew said to me, come on, we want to take you out the back. We're not going to tell you what we found. We want to see your reaction. And we found a 20-foot statue of Galileo. And Galileo, to me, is one of the all-time greats. And then after that, we left Rome and we went to Bologna, which is a round city set out to a zodiac with 12 gates around it. Each gate is named after each sign of a zodiac. And this is where Cecco d'Ascoli, the last professor of astrology, was burnt at the stake, along with da Ferrara, who taught Copernicus. In Rome, I went to the Capo di Fiera, where the statue to Bruno, who was also burnt at the stake for daring to suggest that the Earth was not the center of the universe. After Bologna, we went to Florence, and the big cathedral was just so full I couldn't get in there. But I went to the Basilica in Florence, where I found myself standing in front of a tomb of Galileo, which was directly opposite the tomb of Michelangelo and right next door to the tomb of Nicholas Machiavelli. And you can only imagine what Galileo, Michelangelo, and Machiavelli are up to in the upstairs department at the moment. And then we went to the Galileo Museum, where I saw Galileo's telescope and his tools that he used. And Galileo, once he saw the moons of Jupiter, that was the final nail in the coffin of the Catholic Church's assertion that the Earth was the center of the solar system. That was it. So to me, Galileo's one of the greats. Then we came back and I got sick. And now I'm just recovering. And now I'm just doing a little bit of work for a couple of weeks to try and make some money, because I'm self-funding all of this. I've used my life savings on this. And I need to mention astrologyhub.com. They featured me a couple of times, and they've put up a donations page for me, and they've given me, so far, those people have given me about £3,000-4,000, which is paid for so many hotels and plane flights. They're brilliant people. Now, starting in a week and a half's time, I'm going for 6 weeks into a studio with a green screen and lots of backdrops of different things. We're doing 9 episodes. Episode 1 is 70,000 BC to 600 AD. That's Sumeria, Assyria, Babylon, Chaldea, Egypt, and the stone circles of Western Europe. Episode 2 is Greece. Episode 3 is Rome. Episode 4 is the Byzantine Empire of 465 AD, from Constantinople all the way around the Mediterranean coast to Morocco, where the Arabs and Berbers got together to make the Moors, moved into Spain, the Moorish architecture and the Moorish perfection, where they got all the stuff around the fixed stars, the Arabic parts. Episode 5 is the translation from the Arabic into Latin of Plato's work, along with Aristotle's work, and the Renaissance through to about 1450. Episode 6 is Magical Britain, the time of Elizabeth I through to the Civil War, and some of the stuff that was going on in Europe at the time with Tycho Brahe, and Johann Kepler. Episode 7 is astrology in the Americas, because astrology jumped to the Americas in the late 1600s for 150 years. There was a professor of astrology at Harvard University in the 1700s. And we'll be looking also at what was going on in Europe at that time. Episode 7 is the Edwardian times, the Georgian times, the re-emergence of astrology into Europe over the 17 and middle 1800s. Episode 8 is the time from about 1840 through to 1960, involving the discovery of Neptune, Pluto, Chiron maybe. And episode 9, the final episode, will be the time of sort of 1990 through to 2030, the technological revolution and how astrology works with that. There's going to be a 15-minute episode 0 where we're going to feature little clips from every episode. And there's also going to be a blooper reel, which is already looking like it's going to be hilarious. And I'm going to be posting, we're building a website to put this on. I've turned down money from Netflix. Because we don't want to give control of it to anyone else. It's a legacy thing for astrologers and for my grandkids. So I'm going to build a website to put it on where people can stream it for micro payments, episode by episode. And that way it will always be there as a resource for people. And this is my legacy in gratitude for all the things that astrology's given me over the years. So yeah, the first episodes should be, if all goes according to plan, should be released by the end of February, and all episodes will be out by middle of May. And there is talk of series 2 and series 3, but I'm going to need a break after this.
Well, I
So
think it's fantastic. That's such amazing news, and I'm really, really glad that you're finding a way to stream it and realistically monetize it as well. Because if there's going to be series 2 and a series 3, things don't happen on thin air, and you'll only go forward, if we as a global community support you. And so that's something for us all to be thinking about. And Steve, a big thank you from all of us for this really, really extraordinary labor of love that you've engaged in with the documentary. And it'll be wonderful. I know, because we all watch your videos, and I'm sure, it'll be so fantastic to see you in place, actually in the place, talking about the actual history, surrounded by the artifacts and the ideas, the landscape, the light, and all of that. But listen, Steve, we haven't had an open mic session tonight because you've just been so wonderful and so generous with your time and your energy, and how you have, and we've had wonderful questions. I know that we've had people have really stepped forward from our audience and asked you some fantastic questions. So in fact, we have come to the end of the evening. Is there, I would like to just extend from Aquarius 7 our thanks to you. Is there anything as a final thank you or a final farewell from you to your students who are in the room, or to anybody else? Would you like just to have a last word?
yeah, it's quite simple. It's my catchphrase. It started as a joke when I got my first email in 1998, 99. Got my first website in 2000. It's my catchphrase. It's on every email I send. Negativity can't exist where there's humour. Laugh. What you got to lose?
Yeah, indeed. Well, we can all leave tonight with those words echoing in our ears. Steve Judd, thank you so much for joining us in Aquarius 7. Aquarius 7 meets here the first Thursday of every month. We have talks planned every month for the next year or so. So, please do come back. Any of you who are here now, you're always welcome. Steve, we will be in touch. And again, all of us, not just Aquarius 7, but everybody in the room, and indeed astrologers around the world, we extend our thanks to you. You go carefully, and may you get better soon, and we'll look forward to seeing your next video. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.